5 Live Formula One.
The Italian Grand Prix has just come to a close. The checkered flag has waved and it was pole, fastest lap in Formula One history, and the race win for Max Verstappen. A magical weekend. He beat the two McLaren drivers by almost 20 seconds. Lando Norris closing the gap to teammate Oscar Piastri in the championship to 31 points. After a bit of a controversial move, which saw Piastri briefly inherit second after a slow pit stop for Lando Norris. We will chat all things McLaren, but first we've got to start with our race winner, Max Verstappen. It's Harry Benjamin with you on the Checkered Flag race review. Alice Powell is alongside me, and it was an absolutely mighty weekend, wasn't it, for the Dutchman?
Well, yeah, that's one way to describe it. We didn't expect this coming into the weekend, did we? To see Max Verstappen in his Red Bull winning by 19.2 seconds. I mean, we said after qualifying that was an impressive lap from him, and it certainly was. And we said, it'll be touch and go for winning the race on Sunday. You know, McLaren still have the legs on Red Bull in terms of race pace. But Verstappen did Verstappen things, didn't he? And he drove a blinder. He drove a brilliant race, and when we thought, his tyres look a bit worse for wear, they need to go quite quickly in the bin, he still eked time out of them and ended up being too strong for McLaren to match.
But he lost the lead, didn't he, at the start? It was quite aggressive, wasn't it, between Max Verstappen and Lando Norris. He forced Norris up onto the grassy verge that runs down towards the first chicane and then cut the corner and stayed ahead. I mean, how did you read that at the time? Because ultimately, no penalty came of it. Red Bull rather prevented that from even happening.
You know, when you're racing wheel to wheel with Max Verstappen, that it's going to be aggressive. And he certainly was aggressive, maybe a bit too aggressive. It was a great start by Lando Norris. He didn't get as much wheel spin as what it sounded on the coverage as Max Verstappen did. So that allowed him to draw up a sort of 3/4 of the way alongside Max. And yeah, Max just sort of forced him onto the grass. So I think it was the right thing for Red Bull to make the call to swap positions. And then we thought, well, here we go. We're probably going to see Lando Norris drive off into the distance, but it wasn't the case. A couple of laps later, Max Verstappen made his way back past and checked out.
So why was, though, the Red Bull, I mean, in the hands of Max Verstappen at least, clear of the McLarens? I mean, 20 seconds is a mighty gap over a car that has been the dominant car this year in the McLaren.
So there's several reasons for that, and I think the main one we can talk about is the rear wing on the back of the Red Bull. We've talked about it before in the past. That skinnier rear wing, that's going to produce less drag, and this is a low downforce circuit. McLaren have a chunkier rear wing. Of course, that's going to be draggier than Red Bull's one. So they had the legs in terms of speed on McLaren down the straights, and there are a lot of straights here. There's heavy braking zones, but there's not those long corners as well, which favour the McLaren. So that was a big help for why Red Bull were able to sort of match and take it to McLaren. And even when Max Verstappen maybe doesn't have the best car, let's say the time difference between the two cars maybe this weekend could have been, let's say, a couple of tenths. I don't know if it was, but you always then expect, well, Max Verstappen will extract some speed to then match, if not further, his rivals, because that's just the type of driver he is. He's just sensational. He's one of the very, very best that we will see in Formula One, and he just drove it fantastically. And his tyre management, we thought, Lando's coming back, but he was just managing his tyres perfectly and did a brilliant job.
I also think it's worth noting, though, that obviously they brought that aggressive low downforce rear wing, which a lot of the teams obviously opt for in Monza to get that efficiency in a straight line. But Max Verstappen did have some new bits on the floor of his Red Bull this weekend. So I think that clearly has shown that the Red Bull has taken a step forward. And quite crucial, I think, this is Laurent Mekies' first Grand Prix victory for the team as team principal.
And Max Verstappen pointed that out on the radio, didn't he? He was quick to congratulate him. And we're going to sit here and we're going to probably say, well, is this Red Bull coming back? I don't think so. I still think that McLaren is the stronger car. They were stronger, of course, last time out in Zandvoort. Baku has some long straights. It doesn't have too many long corners. It's an exciting, bumpy street circuit. So Verstappen, he quite likes that circuit, has done very well in the past there before. So maybe we will see them next time out pretty close to the McLarens and potentially beating them. And more importantly for us fans, getting in and amongst this championship battle that we have on our hands between Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris.
But it was mighty Max in Monza, a third win of the season, the 66th of his career. Let's hear what he had to say after taking victory. He's speaking with Jenny Gao.
Max, phenomenal result and such pace from your car. Where did that come from? It's amazing.
I think I felt already quite happy on Friday, but I think also with the changes that we made, like heading into qualifying, it just made it even better. So, of course, a little bit positively surprised going into the race, seeing the gap that I could pull. Of course, the end of that first stint, McLaren was strong again. But we just followed our normal strategy where, of course, McLaren then opted to stay out and hope for a safety car. That's why, of course, at the end, the gap was bigger than it should have been. But for us, of course, it's just a fantastic weekend.
I'm interested, how do you call the McLaren switch? Obviously, they had a long pit stop with Norris.
Yeah.
So would you have done that? And what do you think about them doing it?
Well, at the end of the day, the team decides, right? So I'm not here to say anything about that. I mean, it's them that will fight for the championship. The constructors is already basically done also, for them. So they make their own rules between the two, and there's nothing really that we can say about that.
Max Verstappen speaking after taking victory and giving his thoughts on the team order controversy between Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris. So let's come on to that, arguably the biggest point from the Italian Grand Prix, with Piastri being ordered to relinquish second place to teammate Norris after Norris had a slow pit stop, dropped behind the Australian. After, though, Lando had been running for second for most of the race. We're now joined by the BBC's F1 correspondent, Andrew Benson. I mean, Andrew, what have you picked up from the paddock post-race on this? It is the talking point of the town.
That's right. I mean, I've just come from the press conference that Andrea Stella, the McLaren team principal, holds after every race. He's always very open and eloquent about these sorts of topics. I mean, basically what they were saying was that, it was fair that Norris finished second, and they obviously chose to stop Piastri first, which is unconventional. Normally in these situations, with no other considerations, the lead driver gets choice of primary strategy, and the second driver has to wait, which is why Norris questioned it on the radio during the race and said he said he was fine with it as long as there was no undercut. And of course, there was an undercut in the end, even though it was inadvertent because of the problem with Norris's front left wheel gun. So Stella said the problem had obviously arisen because they'd chosen to stop Piastri first, therefore, and that was in the team interest, he said, then that obviously led to them swapping positions, so they thought it was only right that they swapped them back again, and that was that was in compliance with their racing principles, as he put it.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of still surprised. I don't know what your opinion is on it, Andrew, that they did do the swap, because so I understand why they did it, and they did it because they want to have a clean fight, an equal fight between the two drivers on track. They don't want anything interfering, like a pit stop. But I have to sort of in somewhat agree a little bit with Oscar Piastri when he says, well, that's part of racing, and it is part of racing. There's a lot of jeopardy in pit stops. Things can certainly go very well and things can go very wrong, and this was just one of the things that happened to go wrong. A bit of luck of the draw, but yeah, ultimately we want to see a close battle between these two drivers that are fighting for their first World Drivers' Championship in Formula One, and that has allowed now Lando Norris to eke 3 points closer to Piastri, but he's still 31 points behind his teammate.
I just think it's quite remarkable what we witnessed, and we're kind of seeing, I think, the Andrea Stella school of McLaren really being instilled in the two drivers. This is the bit of team radio, and I'll read it out what was said, that went to Oscar Piastri when he was then ahead of Lando Norris. So this is coming from his engineer, Tom Stallard, who says, "This is a bit like Hungary last year. We pitted in this order for team reasons. Let Lando pass and then you're free to race." Oscar Piastri replies and says, "We said that a slow pit stop was part of racing, so I don't really get what changed here, but I'll do it." And Andrew, I suppose he's got a point. This is Formula One, and it's a team sport, and that is highlighted in a Grand Prix when a driver comes in for a pit stop. So are McLaren maybe taking away a little bit of this sporting entity that we like to witness, of two drivers battling it out in the same team?
Well, I think the principle is they're trying not to get in the way. McLaren, they want the drivers to have a fair fight for the championship. They've been very, very clear about that from the beginning of the season. I think the problem comes in the nuance of the detail, Harry, doesn't it? You know, you could argue that this is just the racing fates. You know, as Alice said, you can have a slow pit stop. It's bad luck. And if that was Verstappen that Piastri was racing with, or Norris was racing with, then they would have lost the position, and that would have been that. But if you flip that around and take it from the McLaren perspective, you can say they chose to stop Piastri first, which was an unconventional decision. Now, they say the reason for that was to protect him against Leclerc. Now, I think that's a questionable justification, because Leclerc was 28.5 seconds behind Piastri at the time, closing at about half a second a lap. Now, it takes about 25 seconds for a pit stop here at Monza. So they had, by that reckoning, they had about 7 laps of cushion before Piastri really came under threat from Leclerc. So I don't really understand that justification. And I asked Andrea Stella about that question twice after the race, once during the press conference and once after. I sort of went up to him after he'd finished and said, "Look, can you just explain this again?" And he said, "We will review that with the strategy team." That decision came from the strategy team. But to go back to the original decision, you know, from their perspective, the same group of mechanics do the pit stops. They chose to stop the drivers in that order. Therefore, it was their fault. It's their wheel gun that went wrong. Now, we don't know, because obviously, a butterfly flaps its wings in China, and there's a cliff collapses in the Andes. All that sort of stuff about chaos theory. We don't know that the gun would also have failed if they'd stopped the cars the other way around. But the gun did fail on the second stop. They chose that the second stop was Norris, and therefore it's their fault from their perspective that they affected his result, and therefore they think they should fix that. So that's the reasoning.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's hear from the two McLaren drivers, second and third, Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, starting with Lando.
Lando, a dramatic race, especially at the start of it. Just describe those few opening laps, because it looked like you almost had it.
No, I mean I did, but I kept my foot in and I didn't back down. So in quite a few risky positions, whether it was turn 1 on the brakes or before turn 1 across the grass, I took the risks, but we were just too slow today. So sadly, we didn't have the pace to back up those risks I took in the beginning, and just the good racing that me and Max had, which is unfortunate. What you want, like something, when you do something well, you want it to be like paid off. Today doesn't feel like it was like that, because we were just not quick enough, and Max was and the Red Bull was too quick. So clearly they've had a better car today, and it's not often, maybe like twice ever this year we've said something like that. So it's clear we have things to work on, and it's pretty late in the season, so there's not a lot of things we can, but for the future, it's clear we don't have a good enough car here, both yesterday and today, and we have work to do in these low downforce circuits. But when you're good at 99% and struggle a little bit in the others, you have to work out what compromises you want to make, and if you're going to be struggling in a couple. Here, Vegas, we were pretty shocking last year, so yeah, it doesn't fill us with confidence at these certain places, but when you've dominated other races by 20-30 seconds, you have to keep that in the back of your mind too. So frustrating race not to be able to fight for a win, But congrats to Max and to Red Bull. They did a better job and they had a better car this weekend, and we take it on the chin and move on.
And just tell me, we're all debating what happened in the pit stop. It seemed to take an age for that wheel to come on front left. I was talking and commentating through it. It must have taken a long time in your cockpit, but the decision to reverse those places, it's quite a strong call. Do you still believe it's the right call?
Yep. If it was the other way around, I'd have to do the same thing. So
does it sum up what's happening with McLaren and how it
just
works?
proves we're a fair team. We work together well as a team. That's why we're the best team. Just because others don't do that and haven't done that doesn't mean that they're right. We believe we do it the correct way, in the most fair way. It's not the reason, but it's a small reason why we were champions last year, why we're going to be champions again this year. So, I think as a team we believe in our own ways, and we don't really care what the others say.
Hi Oscar, good race out there, some amazing battles. Unfortunately it didn't go on for long enough, but how did you feel for those first few opening laps?
Felt pretty chaotic. Made a good move on Leclerc at the start, but then after that maybe not my wisest move into turn one, and then lost it again. So some things I probably would have done a bit differently. Ultimately, I don't think it really affected the result. I was able to get back into third, but just struggled as well with the balance for the first half of the race. So some things to work on, I think, with that.
Obviously, McLaren just weren't fast enough today, which is unusual for us to say, but also it's quite controversial, the switch that they've made after the pit stop went wrong for Lando, and to switch your places. How did you react to that, and how are you feeling after it?
I think it was a reasonable request. Lando was ahead the whole race. So I think from that side of things, I don't really have any issues. There's definitely some things to discuss with the team, but as we always do when situations like this come up. So for me, I don't have any problems.
So Oscar Piastri, they're not having any big bones to pick about it, at least when speaking to the media, Andrew. But I wonder, can you cast your mind back when we've had intra-team title fights and they've both been seemingly quite happy to play ball here? I'm just trying to remember, because I think I said on the coverage, if this was Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton, I think one of them, whoever was asked to let the other car through, would have gone deaf, and suddenly their team radio wouldn't have been working.
I think pretty much any situation with any other team, with any other set of drivers, would have played out very, very differently. And let's not forget that in Hungary a year ago, Norris took 10 laps or so before he finally acceded to the request from the team to let Piastri back past. And that was the situation that Tom Stallard, Oscar Piastri's engineer, referenced when he asked or ordered Piastri to do it. Of course, there's an academic debate here about where does interference start and where does it stop, and where are you actually interfering in the championship and where are you not interfering with the championship. If we go back two races to Hungary, you had a situation where Piastri was kept on a two-stop as the lead driver, battling for the lead at the time with Charles Leclerc. Lando Norris had a bad start, dropped back to fifth place. They extended his first stint. At that time, they had no intention of one-stopping him, but it turned into a one-stop, and that led to him winning the race. Now, there are people in the pit lane, senior people at other teams that I've talked to, who think that was an unfair decision on McLaren's behalf against Piastri and in favour of Norris. And they were very surprised that they did it. But McLaren are very firm. No, we're letting them race, and letting them race means whatever race situation they're in, if they end up wanting to choose a different strategy to try to beat the other, then that's fine. You can argue about these things all day, but I think what it was interesting to hear Piastri there, because he changed his tune quite a lot from getting out of the car into the post-race interview with Jenny. And of course, we don't know how much of that was him doing what he was told by the team bosses. But I think if you take a couple of steps back and think, what was the fair result here? The fair result was Norris finishing second. And it is unquestionable that the decision to stop Piastri first was a disadvantage to Norris on paper, and McLaren chose to do it. and they promised Norris that that wouldn't affect the finishing positions, and they said to Piastri that it wouldn't affect the finishing positions. They did it through a fault of the team, not the drivers. It did affect the finishing positions if they hadn't done anything, and therefore it is very easy to see the logical justification for the argument that this was a fair decision in that context. And just one thing that's worth saying, if we take another step back from that, this is what the general public, those who have an objective interest in the championship, wanted to see. If you said 3 points earlier in this section, Harry, I think actually when you have two drivers who are 3 points apart, it's a 6-point swing if they swap positions. So although Norris has gained 3 points on Piastri now, which is a good thing for the championship going on for longer, for all of our entertainment. Had it been the other way around, Piastri would have gained 3 points, so 6 points, that's the swing, and that would have made the championship very, very difficult for Norris. So I think for all of us who are disinterested in the championship but definitely interested in watching it, we should be glad that McLaren did this and didn't leave it the way it was.
And I think what's also quite interesting, Andrew, is what Oscar said on the radio. He said, we said that a slow pit stop was part of racing, so I don't really get what's changed here. So it sounds like they might have even had a chat about slow pit stops. But as you said, I think because they said that by pitting Piastri first and Lando second, it would not affect the finishing positions, which is, again, another reason probably why they had to swap the positions around, because that's what they said prior to both drivers coming into the pits.
And as Andrew said, it is good for the championship, at least in one respect. Andrew, look, I know you've got to run off and file your reports and speak to everybody up and down the paddock. Last question to you while we've got you. Ultimately, though, it seemed that the gap, we said it at the start of the pod, Max Verstappen finished almost 20 seconds ahead of Lando Norris. McLaren weren't really that much in the fight for the win here. They tried to stay out as late as possible. Was that really their only hope in seeing if they could challenge Verstappen for the win?
So basically what they were hoping for by staying out late was a safety car. Wait for the safety car, hope it comes, stick on the soft tyres at the end. That gives them a pit stop that's half the length of a normal pit stop. That would have closed up the gap, and it would have given them a chance to challenge Verstappen at the end of the race with a tyre offset. That was the plan. The safety car never came, despite the best efforts of Carlos Sainz and Oliver Behrman. And so it didn't end up like that, and then that led to the 20-second, whatever it was, very nearly 20 seconds deficit. It wouldn't have been 20 seconds had McLaren not done this strategy in a vain attempt to try to beat the Red Bull. You are right, they're sort of, apart from the McLaren controversy, the big interest about this race was that Verstappen and Red Bull are back. They've won for the first time since the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix back in May, the last Italian race. I don't think this necessarily means that they're going to be in the fight every race weekend. This is a very specific circuit. I expected Red Bull to be more competitive this weekend. I didn't expect them to be this competitive. So I think it's clear that under new team principal Laurent Mekies, they've definitely made some progress with the car this weekend. It came here in a happier place, and they've progressed it ever since, and were definitely the fastest car driver combination. So that's just extra intrigue going forwards to see if Red Bull can carry that on for the rest of the season. But I don't think it will carry on like this for the rest of the season. I think when we get to tracks, next we're in Baku, that might be interesting because it's a similar sort of circuit. But when we get to places like Singapore, Austin, you can expect McLaren to be back where they were, I think.
All right, thanks, Andrew. We shall let you go on that one. Ultimately, though, Norris finishing ahead of Oscar Piastri in that race brings the gap down slightly in the championship to 31 points before we head to Baku in a couple of weeks. That's how the podium looked then, at least, Alice. And outside of it, well, about 4 seconds adrift of a podium was the leading Ferrari, Charles Leclerc. It wasn't a fairy tale podium or even a fairy tale win in front of the Tifosi this time out.
It wasn't. I mean, we were getting quite excited at the start because he did get in front of Oscar Piastri. He held Piastri back for several laps. But yeah, like you said, it wasn't meant to be. But McLaren were slightly worried about Leclerc towards the end there, but ultimately they just didn't have the pace to really challenge for a podium. Charles Leclerc was a little bit disappointed when he got out of his car. He kept his visor down, he waved to the crowd, but I think Lewis Hamilton, who finished down in 6th, will probably be fairly happy because he did start in 10th. Of course, he had that 5-place grid penalty bringing over from Zandvoort. But I mean, they will be disappointed because a Ferrari podium's always special here in Monza, but I still think that's a solid effort from them and the best that they could have really done.
And still no win, though, for a Ferrari this season. 15 Grand Prix have gone by, and Charles Leclerc, I think he sits, he's the highest driver in the championship without a win this season. He sits 5th in the Drivers' Championship, but for a team that are fighting for really second in the Constructors' Championship, no victory to their name still. It's just so uncharacteristic of Ferrari to not at least get one by now.
Well, exactly. But as you mentioned, they're sitting second in the Construction. You think, well, they've not won a race. Red Bull are down in 4th place and they've obviously won more than one race this season. But that just shows they've got some sort of consistency amongst the sort of their rivals, Mercedes. They've probably got the stronger driver lineup, maybe compared to Mercedes, I would say, and Red Bull. So, yeah, no win, but which of course they will be heavily disappointed because they want to win races. But I think they can still think the season's actually not going terribly badly if you do look at the constructors, because points make big prizes in terms of finances in the constructors, and they're sitting second at the moment.
And obviously they didn't score any points last time out, a double DNF for Ferrari. So now both outscoring Mercedes, who are chasing them, now puts them 20 points clear in the Constructors' Championship. But it was Charles Leclerc who was the leading Ferrari, finished in 4th. Let's hear from him speaking to Jen.
Charles, wow, that was a race. I mean, I don't know where to start. Describe it for us.
Yeah, I mean, the first few laps were interesting. After that, it was a little bit less interesting. But, yeah, I couldn't do much. I mean, I was all over the place in the first few laps. I've just tried everything to try and get that place with Oscar, but I was sliding all over the place. So I tried, not enough. We'll try again next time.
We saw you try and come in formation after the finish line, you and Lewis. I think we trying to reenact almost the Ferrari. It gave me chills. How do you feel after that?
It feels always special because here we've got so much support and yeah, it was a nice way to thank the Tifosi together and it's just a shame. I mean, as much as this weekend is incredible, I think emotions are also bigger after the race, whether it's positive or negative. Obviously, finishing P4, it's negative, and I'm not happy that we couldn't thank them in a better way, but it's the way it is at the moment. We don't have the race pace to go and fight for better positions. I've tried. We maximise the results, but it's not enough.
Were you confused about the pit stop, weren't you? Do you think there was more on the cards then?
No, I was just worried that there would be a safety car and that we will pay the price of that. So that was the only risk by stopping early at that point, because we had no... George was far enough for us to continue more laps, so I would have... Threat, exactly. That's the word I was searching for, yeah. So we had no threats behind, so that's why I wish we had... I mean, at that point, I was just worried about a safety car, and then you lose another position. So that's why, but at the end... I think that was optimal for us and we didn't lose anything.
So Charles Leclerc then in 4th, and Lewis Hamilton, his first official Italian Grand Prix in front of the Tifosi, obviously qualified 5th, had the 5-place grid penalty. Good fight back from him, Alice, to come home in 6th?
I think it was. It was some nice moves he made up through the field. He was roared, cheered on every time he went down past the main grandstand, every time he came out the pits, especially during the free practice sessions. Very popular here are both Ferrari drivers, but a solid effort from Hamilton, of course, starting down in 10th place. He was closing that gap down on Russell. Wasn't able to get Russell in the end, but still a good job.
Let's hear from Lewis Hamilton, finished 6th for Ferrari.
Lewis, P6, considering where you started, it looked like the start of that race was a lot of fun.
It was. Had a great start. I had such a good start. I got squeezed between two cars and I had to back off, so lost a bit of ground. But after that, good placing of the car, good positions through 1 and 2, and then after that, slowly making my way through. And then all of a sudden, I was right behind the group that wasn't too far behind Charles, which I think was in 2nd or 3rd or 4th at the time. And I gave it absolutely everything.
Just tell me what that was like with the national anthem and then the flyover and the Tifosi. I mean, even for me standing on the grid, I had chills and bumps. So for you as the driver, it must be unbelievable.
It really is, and it's almost too much to take in. That's why on the parade lap I was filming it, because it's happening so fast, and it will pass by real quick. So which it did. But yeah, you see, the Tifosi here are just it's the most special fan base in the world, and such a privilege to be able to represent them. And I hope that today's drive was good enough for them. I think hopefully next time we come back here, hopefully we'll have a better car so we could fight for it.
Okay, so the two Ferraris then bagging some crucial points, but no podium for them. George Russell finished in between them in fifth, so decent result for him in the Mercedes, although I think he's lacking satisfaction from those results at the moment. He'll be wanting more and soon. Someone taking, I think, an immense bit of satisfaction from this Grand Prix, Alex Albon, finished in seventh. That was a great race from the Thai driver once again.
He started 14th on the grid, so made his way up through the order. He had some nice scraps along the way. Of course, he had that moment with his teammate Sainz, who finished down in 11th, where Sainz was told on the radio, "Can you please take that tighter line round turn 3, which you talked about, to then release Albon." Had the legs on his teammate in terms of pace during the race today, so he'll be pleased to drag his Williams up from 14th into some points, and some good points for them, in who they currently sit 5th place in the Constructors' Championship, and that's good points because they've got Aston Martin, which are breathing down their neck.
Yeah, 24 points, the gap between 5th and 6th in the Constructors. Aston Martin sitting with 62 points, and then they're only a point ahead of the Racing Bulls of Isaac Hadjar and Liam Lawson, who managed to pick up 1 point, did Hadjar, from pit lane to 10th, and they're only a handful of points ahead of Sauber and then Haas too, all in a pretty immense fight in that midfield. So again, while Albon, crucial for them to get 7th, Bortoleto with a good result in 8th place. At one point he was running and challenging George Russell early on in the race.
He was, and we were getting quite excited, weren't we, with Bortoleto, who, again, is one of the rookies of the season. I still think Hadjar probably maybe just about pips him to that, but solid job by Bortoleto. Antonelli will pleased to be in the points. But Hadjar, he did a great job. He started all the way, he had a terrible qualifying, so started all the way down in 19th place. And got up into the points. Another strong showing from the rookie. Puts him up a place in the Drivers' Championship as well. Antonelli, 9th, but pretty far away from his teammate in the end at his Italian home Grand Prix. Just missing out on the points was Carlos Sainz. Ollie Behrman, 12th. Sonoda with another tough day at the office in 13th. He had a scrap with Liam Lawson, who finished behind him. Ocon, Gasly, Colapinto and Stroll. The 18 finishers in the Grand Prix. We lost Fernando Alonso due to suspension failure whilst running in the point, so they'll be ruining that. And Nico Hulkenberg, with a hydraulic issue, failed to start the race and had to retire on the formation lap. Okay, driver of the day, Alice, and then we'll wrap it up, shall we? I'm going to go for Max Verstappen, because that was just super impressive. Even at the end there on the hard tyre, he just missed out on the fastest lap on the final lap, but he was still matching the pace of the McLarens who were on the soft tyre. So solid job and good points and a good win for him. Yeah, I think it's a clean sweep, at least between us two, for Max Verstappen on that one. Okay, that brings us to a close. The European leg is over and we head for 8 races to go until we get to the checkered flag in Abu Dhabi. We'll have a weekend off and then we pitch up in Baku for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Thanks to the whole team for this weekend. We shall see you then. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.